Farrell is named as Ireland's team for the second test against the Springboks this Saturday in Durban. And just like last week, he's given us plenty to talk about. Squad captain Peter O'Mahony has been named on the bench as the pack undergoes a bit of a rejig, while injuries to Dan Sheehan, Craig Casey and Bundy Aki sees a couple of changes elsewhere also. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. Will Slattery here with you. I'm delighted to be joined by Ruaidhri O'Connor from what looks to be another very sunny day in South Africa. And Rud, it's funny, before we came on and before I saw the team, I thought it might be, a little bit of a duller podcast, maybe not that much to sink our teeth into. But then we saw the news that Peter O'Mahony has been left on the bench and he's gone with Tyburn at number 6, bringing James Ryan into the second row. That's one of the changes, just for other people who might not have seen it. Ronan Kelleher obviously starts instead of Dan Sheehan. Garry Ringrose is in for Bundy Aki, who misses out entirely through injury. Conor Murray is starting at scrum half instead of Craig Casey. And then on the bench, we have Rob Herring coming in, Caelan Blade coming in, and Stuart McCloskey coming in as well. But let's start with the Peter O'Mahony news. What did you make of it when you saw it?
Yeah, it's funny. No one got wind of this week. They kept the team very much under wraps compared to last week when, I think we all had heard about Jamie Osborne and it broke fairly early. But there was a sense during the week that he had something up his sleeve, that there was, Andy Farrell was really unhappy with the performance last weekend. I think he was very disappointed with the way the team played in the first half in particular. And Peter O'Mahony, it looks like, is paying the price for that. It's a big call to leave your captain out of a starting team, and what may be his final international, certainly as captain. I think there's a sense of this is a bit of a swan song for O'Mahony, that the Caelan Doris era is almost upon us, and maybe it's been fast tracked by a week, and obviously O'Mahony will come on and impact the game, and will hope to lead the team home in the last quarter, the last half an hour. But he's paid the price for, he didn't have a terrible game last weekend by any means, but I suppose what Andy Farrell's looking for as captain is someone who can set the tone and be the leader both in body and spirit. And at this stage of his career, is O'Mahony able to do that for a long time against the Springboks? It's hard to see that now. I thought he struggled in Twickenham as well when against a really powerful team. He struggled to impact that game, to get to grips with what was going on. And it's just, it's natural. He's 35 in September. It's coming towards the end of a great career, and Farrell's pulled the trigger. And he's, like, a lot of people have been calling for Byrne to move to 6 for a long time. I know Brendan Fanning, our old colleague, repeatedly called for it. It was a big bugbear of his, he thought, for Ireland to unleash the potential of their pack. It would be a real asset to have Byrne at 6, and it's an exciting change. I know Byrne looked a little bit like all the minutes of the season that caught up on him across the year, but he has that, modern day blindside, line out presence. Ryan, I think, is in good form. He's fresh. He's missed a lot of rugby, so he comes into the second row, and he will add something. He will add industry. He will add bite and aggression alongside Joe McCarthy, who I'd say has been prodded with a cattle prod all week to say you got dominated a bit last week. You're supposed to be our enforcer, so he'll come out kind of frothing at the mouth to make a big impact this week. And yeah, it freshens things up. I think it makes Ireland a more formidable outfit. And then they have, we saw what problems they had when things got a little bit out of hand, and we talked a lot during the week about the referee relations in the final quarter. Well, O'Mahony comes in, 30 minutes, cool, calm head, lots of experience, alongside Ryan Baird, who I thought was brilliant off the bench last weekend. So there's a nice balance to it as well. You can see the thinking, and I think it's a good selection.
Yeah, I agree with you when you said the word unleashing the pack's potential before the tour. When we were doing our preview, one of the selections that we mooted was this exact one, so you can get James Ryan, McCarthy and Tyburn all on the pitch at the same time. And I agree with you. Like, if I'm looking at the team sheet from this week to last week, I think this is a stronger team. I just think it's a better 15 to go out and beat the Springboks. Major call in terms of dropping your captain, but I do think it makes sense from a rugby perspective. As you said, do you think this is the end of, will Peter O'Mahony be playing international rugby this November? Do you think is this his last hurrah? If he's going to be kind of left out of the starting team, it'll be interesting to see his future after this.
Yeah, Andy Farrell lobbied very hard to get Peter O'Mahony to sign on for another year at Munster when Munster weren't even offering him a contract at one stage. So I would be reticent to completely write him off. He's still got a lot to offer, but up against the best teams, I think having him as a guaranteed starter is a tough one. But we saw what South Africa did with Dwayne Vermeulen at the last World Cup. Different players, but they didn't play him in certain games. They brought him in for some big games when they felt he needed his experience. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the end completely, but I do believe that Caelan Doris will be Ireland's captain sooner rather than later, probably in November. And O'Mahony maybe maybe becomes a kind of a chief lieutenant and kind of a consigliere that you can bring off the bench for that final quarter in big games. Maybe there's enough in the tank for 20 minutes whereas there's not in 80, but maybe it is the end. Like, I mean, it comes for everyone, and not everyone gets to have the. I mean, no one gets the O'Driscoll farewell, really. And even, Johnny got 80 minutes in a defeat, but, he was still slinging his passes until the very end. But very few players get to choose how they go out. More often than not, it's a selection, or it's an injury or something like that. And, he owes no one anything. He's been a great player for Ireland. But I did think that he looked off the pace last weekend. And I think it's the right decision to take him out of the firing line, because Ireland, in my opinion, have a better chance of winning with this team than it did last week.
I want to ask you about James Ryan. It's not a person that automatically came to my head as a big storyline from this team selection, but now kind of thinking it in my own head. He was in the bench last weekend. He was in the bench in the Six Nations before he got injured. He came back from injury and was on the bench for Leinster in the Champions Cup final. I know you could argue that was maybe tactical, but if he was playing at the peak of his powers, I don't think he would have been in that position. It's kind of all of a sudden a very big game for him to reassert himself as a starting Ireland player. He for a long time, he was the captain in waiting. He was meant to be the next second row worldwide kind of star kind of guy. Between injuries and form, that kind of dipped. So I'd say this is actually a huge game all of a sudden for him, going up against Etzebeth, going up against Mostert and the South African power.
Yeah, even at the World Cup, he lost his place before he got injured. And I know a lot of people rejected the idea that he was left out, that he was dropped. But, that was the selection call. I mean, he was carrying a few bits at the World Cup, but his role is definitely diminished in this Irish team. And you got to also remember that the Lions coach for next summer is going to be watching this game closely. He is if James Ryan goes out and goes toe to toe with these Boks and does really, really well, I'd say his Lions chances, and having missed the last tour, he would have just assumed he was going to be a Lion. I'm sure at some stage. Maybe that's maybe that's too strong, but he was on course to be a Lion at some stage. And I'd say his chances of that are slipping at the moment. But if he gets back in the team and he's starring in this team and he's part of a team that beats the Boks away from home, suddenly he's right back in that mix as well. And look, we're a long way out from that, but that conversation is going to be happening soon. So James Ryan, I thought he was good off the bench last week. I think he has been quite good since he's come back. Yeah. I think McCarthy helps him redefine his own role and take some of the pressure off him to do some of the stuff that he was being asked to do, that maybe punching a little bit above his weight. And then having Ty Byrne there calling the lineouts takes that pressure off him, because I don't think that sits comfortably with him. And the captaincy, I always thought, was a bit awkward for him. And now Doris has that role. So he can just concentrate on what he's good at. And that's impacting games. And I think I was kind of thinking all week that Ryan should come into the team. I think his experience is valuable against this particular opposition as well. He'll go well. So it's a strong selection. You're right. It's a big game in his career. It's a big game in Ronan Kelleher's career. I mean, it's a big game in Ty Byrne's career, because if that window was opening up and we got Tom Ahern, we got Ryan Baird, we got Cormac Izuchukwu, the younger guys coming through, but like Byrne is perfectly suited to that position of 6. There's a lot of players like Conor Murray, big game. There's a lot of players who will be looking at this as a serious opportunity to either remind Andy Farrell of what they're able to do, or to take this moment and kick on. So it's a big game in its own right, but for a lot of players, it's a big moment in their careers, I think.
Yeah, Ronan Kelleher, like we have talked about him a fair bit, so it's not a new point, but if he can end his season with a big performance heading into next year, where Dan Sheehan won't be playing, as we presume, for the first 6-7 months of the season, it'll set him up well. Like Bongi, as you mentioned on Tuesday, Bongi and Benambi was talking about his power that he brings to the party. If he can go toe-to-toe to what is probably the best hooker in the world at the moment, and the 1-2 punch of himself and Malcolm Marks, Ireland and Leinster going into next year will be feeling a lot better about missing a player like Dan Sheehan for such a long period.
I mentioned the 1-2 punch. I don't think Rob Herring weakens what Ireland can do in that regard. Obviously, Sheehan has X factor that Ireland will miss, but I think Ronan Kelleher has the potential to be a world-class hooker, and was for a period before he got injured and Sheehan emerged. And Sheehan obviously has the ability to make line breaks and do cool things that maybe there's very few players in the world that can do. But Kelleher is powerful. He's strong in contact. He's a good scrummager. He could work in his line out a bit, but that will be important on Saturday. He'll have good options to throw at. And then you got Herring coming on, that 1-2 punch. Herring's a good scrummager, good line out thrower, good contact, good around the contact zone, has never let Ireland down. They're pretty deep in that area. So I'm not really worried about, obviously Sheehan, you would prefer to have Sheehan in the team because he's so good, but I'm not overly concerned about, I'm almost excited to see how Kelleher goes.
Yeah, massive opportunity for him. Caelan Doris, we did discuss it at length on Tuesday about his captaincy and his interactions with Luke Pearson. I did think Simon Easterby's comments were funny. It's like we thought he did unbelievably well in his interactions. I was just like, okay, don't like we all saw it. Like I don't think you can spin that to that degree.
I think he was saying that they had no problem with the way Doris approached it, and they were alluding to the fact that they were very disappointed with the way he, as the Ireland captain, was received. So they agree with me rather than you and Luke will. They thought Doris went well. And they were fairly like they were asked if they got satisfactory feedback from their response to the referees, and he said they got feedback, or it was they weren't particularly satisfied with what they heard. And he's fairly like Simon used to kind of say very little when he was up for the media. He was pretty strong on a number of fronts yesterday. He kind of flagged. I think the way he backed Doris. Maybe you could, if you were reading between the lines, you might have seen this coming, that they were going to send Doris back out there to do the job this weekend. So, he kind of called on the referees to work together as a team. I think they're still very upset that the TMO or none of the touch judges stepped in and flagged the Orgy Snyman Craig Casey tackle. And again, it's not necessarily that they're saying it was foul play, but they thought there was a penalty there in terms of where Orgy Snyman came from and the lateness of the tackle. I think they were looking. I mean, if you think about it, that led to Pollard's kick to touch, scrum penalty, kick to touch, Lowe keeps it in and Colby scores, whereas Ireland could have been lining up a kick to the corner or kick to the post. So a pivotal moment in the game. So, yeah, Easterby was interesting yesterday, but definitely they're backing Doris. They see Doris, like in terms of leading from the front, Doris was Ireland's best player last week. He was the de facto captain in everything that he did. And we do have this one big area that we touched on in the podcast on Tuesday that he has to work on. But they obviously feel that he is their man, and they were very strong in backing him. So I'm fascinated to see his first interaction with Carl Dixon at the weekend. I probably won't get to hear it live because they don't do ref links in South African stadiums, but it will be interesting to see how he gets on in that regard.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see how he balances the increased focus on that element with his general gameplay, because I agree with you, like he was so good in that regard. Does having to devote so much mental energy, or because like he must have been hearing all this talk, I'm sure they discussed it themselves as well. If he's trying to like think so much about the interactions, he might almost it might take him out of his game flow when he's so impactful in that regard. I'll be very fascinated to see how he balances those two things, because the best captains, as we know, like Richie McCaw, like his gameplay never dipped when he was interacting with referees. Brian O'Driscoll was very good in that regard also. So it's a big learning moment for him this weekend as well, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, and if he's going to be the Ireland captain at the 2027 World Cup, then this is the time to invest in him, and like maybe it won't go well for a while, but it's sticking by him and getting him those experiences that will lead one day to him being complete at it. And I think the people around Caelan Doris would say that he maybe isn't a natural captain, that it's something that he'll have to work on. But they obviously trust. They know he's one of the biggest leaders in the team. He plays every game. I think his numbers for Ireland I think he started every game for them this year, including the World Cup game. So he's pivotal to the team, and he's a smart captain selection, because they went to the 2019 World Cup with a captain who was coming to the end. They went to the 2023 World Cup with a captain who was coming to the end. Like this time, if it is Doris and he's fit, and we're obviously way out from it, Ireland will go to the World Cup with a captain who's in his prime. And that's a big difference. I think that's a good thing. It means you're not kind of handcuffed to a player who may run out of road, which was a big concern over Sexton the last time. It didn't happen, but I think Rory best friend at the time, I think he was struggling by the end, although he didn't have a whole host of people chomping at the bit to displace him. So it's good planning. We're looking for signs that Farrell is pivoting towards 2027. Well, there's one right in front of us.
I need a big buzzer in this room when someone says 2027. I hit it, and like a big alarm goes off in the background, and like kind of or electroshocks the person who said it. But I do take your point, actually. Like it's a massive moment, and it is interesting that they've obviously made that little shift this weekend to invest in the future. The other kind of big selection, I suppose, not talking point, because Bundyaki ended up being injured, but for someone who maybe didn't have his best game last weekend, but up to now has been the talisman of the team in the last year, 18 months. He misses out. Garry Ringrose comes back into the starting team. And interestingly, having McCloskey and that power on the bench as well could potentially be telling. What do you make of, I suppose, the addition by subtraction in the sense of having those two guys coming in?
Yeah, well, we don't know if Bundyaki is injured. The RFU are refusing to clarify anything around injuries. They said everyone trained fully. So if you were to take them on their word at that, then it's a dropping. But he had heavy strapping on the shoulder after the game last weekend, and we'll find out later on if he's been left out or whether he's injured. My presumption is he probably is injured, but it would be nice. It's a bit of a inside baseball thing, but it'd be nice if they just kind of get, they clarified these things and didn't leave us all speculating in the dark about it. Like Henshaw, he got pinged from his mouth guard after, what was it, 15, 20 minutes. With Sia Khaleesi ran through him, and they took him off at halftime, and he's been going through the protocols, and they've been very vague on that and the process. But I guess you have to trust the medics that he's okay, he's clear to play. They did improve defensively, certainly, when Ringrose was on the pitch, and he was up for media yesterday. There'll be a piece on the Irish Independent website tomorrow with him, and he is he's a very sure presence in that team. He's very big defender for them. I think he matches up well to Creel, especially with South Africa going wide. He has a big role to play, and he's probably the most comfortable defender in those. I know he misses some tackles that sometimes gets a bit alarming, but he also is the best reader of the game in that defence, certainly in that channel, and he adds an awful lot to them. And McCloskey kind of earns it. Like last week, Andy Farrell was kind of like, he's the most unlucky player in international rugby, Stuart McCloskey, because he always plays well, and he just happens to be, in a selection battle with some of the best players in the world. So I think he could come on and have a big impact in the last 20 minutes. What a powerful player to be able to bring into a big test match. So he's almost like having another flanker who has offloading ability as well. So it's exciting, and it doesn't, prime World Cup Bundy Aki, definitely, but last week's Bundy Aki wasn't at that level, and he's played very little for Connacht this season. It's a very, very curious year for Aki since the World Cup. He was excellent in Six Nations, and he's very important to getting Ireland over the gain line, so they'll miss him. But Henshaw's such a good operator. He had a great tour here a couple of years ago, and hopefully he's over the effects of that tackle last weekend. And nobody likes to get run over. Like he'll be looking to run over a few people this weekend, and I'd say Ireland will want to set a physical tone from the off, because they were bullied a little bit by the South Africans in the first half.
Yeah, the McCloskey one is interesting. I agree. His kind of power style, you think on paper, would match up well with the South Africans, because he started that test in 2022, which was the first time they played under Rozzy Erasmus. But he picked up a stinger, which at the time people thought he might have broken his arm. It turned out he was able to play the next week. So it was a very frustrating moment for him, because he finally gets a nod in a big game and gets like a small little injury, because he had a good start. He had a couple of nice touches, if memory serves, and he was kind of finding his way into the game. So albeit he's on the bench this weekend, but given how quickly that could be sprung in the centre, maybe at a 50-minute mark, getting 30 minutes of a guy like that could be massive in the second half. So just like maybe a James Ryan or a Ronan Kelleher, opportunities are abounding now. Bundy Aki's 34, I think. So talking about guys available for 2027, press the buzzer. McCloskey, he could be one of the guys, albeit he's not that much younger, but like he is a bit younger. So a big kind of potential cameo off the bench this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And Farrell likes him. Farrell rates him. They like having him around the place, and it's a good opportunity for him to remind everyone of how good he is at the end of a long season, and he deserves it. Like when you're up close and personal with them, sometimes you there's a lot of players here who didn't get a minute. They've traveled a long way, and they've trained a lot, and they haven't got a minute. So I'm sure he's relishing the opportunity, having been at nearly every Ireland training session for the last couple of years with limited actual game time. He did play a lot in the Grand Slam campaign, or Six Nations campaign last year, the Grand Slam campaign last year. So he has he has got opportunities under Farrell, but it's a good chance for him to remind. And he finished the season very well. He's in good form, so I'd have full faith in him delivering off the bench.
Any disappointment from your perspective that like players like Cormac Ishukwu, maybe you mentioned Sam Prendergast in your piece, during the week about maybe coming on the bench, someone like Nick Timoney who had a good end of season as well, that like for the most part, bar the injuries, Andy Farrell has kept it to the core. I think I agree with the decision, but what do you think?
The players you mentioned, like Timoney, yeah, he's unlucky, but it would have been a big one to drop O'Mahony altogether, and I can understand going 5-3 given the personnel. So he's unlucky. He was in good form, and I think he's trained well over here. I think Ishukwu and Prendergast, we'll see them in November. They were here to soak it all up, to learn what the level is. And there's 4 games in November. I think after an emerging Ireland tour, they might both go on that. There's a plan in place, I think, for those players. Where I'd be disappointed is Cian Healy being on the bench again. I just don't see a future in it. He was outpowered at the weekend. The reserve front row struggled. I think the scope to get Ollie Yeager in there, we're not at training. We're not seeing what these guys are doing behind the scenes. So it's hard to be completely definitive on it. But at the same time, at some point, I'm sure people have seen the news today. The RFU are going to ban provinces from recruiting overseas front rows from 2025. They need loose heads to back up Andrew Porter. He can't do it on his own. And it's it's absolutely imperative that they start that process now. And I think by putting Healy, maybe they just think it's too much of a jump for Tom O'Toole, who hasn't played loosehead. He's a tight head at provincial level. He's only ever played tight head for Ireland. But to me, it's a big leap. To me, it's a bit missed opportunity, because at some stage they need to get new blood into that position, because Porter's going longer and longer into games, and at some stage it's going to break him.
Yeah, that David Humphreys comment was interesting. We'll definitely discuss that next Tuesday. Just before we finish up, then, prediction for Saturday. I'm definitely more confident. I asked you the same question last week. I'm more confident today, having seen this team, than I was on Tuesday when we were discussing the second test. Do you think Ireland can maybe sneak a win? I think it'll be a close game. I still think South Africa will have too much, but I think it'll be similar to Saturday. I think it'll be close, and a couple of key moments might swing it.
Yeah, test series are weird. There's a weird dynamic at play, and Ireland have hit a bit of a button by making all these changes, whereas South Africa have trusted the same players at the start of their season to go again. I think they'll want to do what they were doing last week, only do it better. I think Ireland have massive improvements to make in terms of their start, in terms of their physicality, setting the tone. I'm beginning to think that Ireland can win this game. Yeah, I didn't as the week started. I was probably thinking it's a game too far at the end of a long season. But when you watch the game, like, Ireland didn't play well last weekend, and they were still in a position to win it, throughout the second half. I expect Pollard to kick his goals this weekend. I expect South Africa to probably put away one or two more of their chances, but I'd also expect Ireland to be more definitive in the way they start the game, get off to a better start, and be more dominant around it. So they've got a really good chance if they deliver. And I do like the team. I like the way Andy Farrell's made the changes. I think he sent the right message out there. So yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be very tight, and I don't know if I'm reluctant to tip them at this stage, but they've got a really good shot of it.
Yeah, well, the team selection definitely heightens the excitement for this Saturday. As you said, it did have this kind of end-of-season feel potentially, but this is kind of ratcheted up once again. So I'm very much looking forward to the game this Saturday. I'd like to thank Rud for joining me. After the game on Saturday, myself, Rud and Keane will be back for another instant reaction after what hopefully is a very entertaining second test. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen to us on the Irish Independent website. So until Saturday, thanks so much for listening to us, and goodbye.